نشكر الدكتورة زينة من جامعة قطر على كلمتها. والآن مع كلمة الدكتور كلينتون فرنتشس عميد كلية القانون من جامعة حمد بن خليفة، فليتفضل.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Clint Francis. I am the Dean of the College of Law and Public Policy for the Hamad bin Khalifa University, which is the graduate college for Qatar Foundation. We have a 3-year Juris Doctor program, and we're about to graduate our first class. What I wanted to do today is talk to you about intellectual property and the role of this for engineers, and particularly for Qatar and its future development. There are various forms of capital, and Qatar has begun, first of all, with the physical capital, its raw materials, and has developed expertise on those. Associated with that, it's developed financial capital, and following that, it's developed human and cultural capital. But a piece that's remaining to be developed in fullness is intellectual capital. And the development of intellectual capital for Qatar is going to be essential for its achievement of the knowledge economy and for its ability to satisfy the achievements of the 2030 vision. So intellectual property is extraordinarily important. It allows a country with a relatively small populace to leverage itself and to take advantage of its great successes as it moves into the international arena in its various investments. Using intellectual property, Qatar and Qatar corporations are able to move from the conditions of open or free competition, which result in low profit levels, and by turning its intellectual capital into intellectual property, it's able to potentially obtain monopoly or oligopoly profits. Nearly 3/4 of the value of most international corporations consists of intellectual property. And Qatar needs to develop this aspect of its future. And if it doesn't, it will lose an opportunity that is extremely important for it. I wanted to give you an illustration of the range of forms of intellectual property and try to make it relevant to engineers using a simple product to show the whole proliferation of these possibilities. You could replace this example with everything from buildings to chemicals to energy products. I'm using a very simple product that is a biometrics monitoring device that you put onto your wrist to monitor your daily exercise, sleep pattern, and other things that you're familiar with. If we take such a product and look at the possible ranges of intellectual property, it will give you a sense of the opportunities that Qatar has to develop different aspects of the products that it is currently producing in the energy and other industries. Every product has 3 dimensions to it. It has a function, it has an expression. An expression is necessary for it to engage with people through one of their 5 cognitive senses. And every product, because we are social creatures, has a name. And each of these 3 dimensions is capable of being rendered into a property form that can be owned and controlled by Qatar. If we start with the function, we see that intellectual property that is recognized internationally and recognized in Qatar, provides two major areas to protect functions. That is the ideas and utility associated with products. So you can obtain patents over the materials, over the device, over the process of manufacture, or the method of using those. Patent law is a key method of doing that, but trade secrets are also essential in order to capture the value associated with functions and can be used in conjunction or in place of patent law. These are both available to kata, and they need to be developed within its engineering and other aspects of its industry. With respect to expression, that's the aspect of the cognitive dimension of a product that we engage in. If we take this particular product here, this biometric watch, we can see that it has a number of expressive dimensions that could be protected here. Where does it function? There was the electronics, the materials associated. We now go to aspects that are principally visual in this case, though other products have other cognitives. So we see that the design of this product is capable of being protected in a property form. We see that the code used in this product is similarly protectable, as is the user interface and any coding that may be associated with its operation. The products need to be closely examined to find out whether they qualify for protection using either copyright or aspects of trademark law that are recognized in kata. So a product needs to be carefully looked not just for its technology or function, but at the level of its expression. And it often is the most powerful way of protecting a device. Apple Corporation's fortunes have been made not principally on function. Many of its functions are shared by its competitors, but based upon its protection of its expression in its product. Products are also given names in the marketplace. They are often given logos and sometimes slogans. Each of these is capable of protection in intellectual property law by another body of law called trademark. Again, this is potentially protectable within Qatari law. Qatar has an international reputation. Its products, including its energy products, have unique international reputations. It needs to be developing the trademark aspects of these to distinguish itself in an otherwise generic market. Extremely important. If it doesn't do it soon, it will lose the opportunity and cede these value propositions to international partners. So in the case of our wristwatch, which is a Samsung product by virtue of the illustration I'm using, it has a name, it has a logo, and there is also a slogan with it. So this simple product provides us with the full range of possible forms of intellectual property. Whether it would qualify depends upon examination. But similarly, any product that is developed by kata, be it energy, be it a manufactured product, be it a sports product or a media product, are capable of protection using some range of these devices. And kata needs to look very carefully at the use of these to harness the market power that will be lost to it if it doesn't do so. When it uses intellectual property, it needs to do so with skill. It's not simply that you file for every form of intellectual property. You need to be very strategic. And you need to have people who are very thoughtful in relation to it. Not all forms of intellectual property have the same advantage. Engineers tend to focus on patent law, because they are heavily involved with the function. But it turns out patent law is the most expensive to both obtain, to monitor, and enforce. It can be potentially very valuable, but one needs to exercise caution. At the other end of the spectrum, trademark law is the easiest to obtain, easiest to monitor infringement, and easiest to prosecute in the event that you discover infringement. Another dimension that needs to be examined is the ability to what I call articulate intellectual property, to use it as part of a business strategy, and I'll explain what's involved in this in a moment, to move value from one dimension of a product to another, or from one product to another, or from one industry to another. Intellectual property is a key vehicle for carrying the value, but not all forms are equally capable of articulation. And again, patent law can be a vital part, but frequently it's the levels of expression and trademarking that allow you to give the maximum articulation to your intellectual property. And engineers need to be focusing on that and moving away from their exclusive function, focus on function and the associated intellectual property. Finally, cost. Associated with this, the cost of, or cost effectiveness needs to be examined. A very powerful patent can be very cost effective, but they're few and far between. And protecting not function using patents, but trade secrets becomes more cost effective, and protection of expression and name often become the most cost-effective ways of protecting your products. Kata needs to become fully aware of this and develop the skill to harness these powers. In order for you to capture or appropriate all of the value that's associated potentially with intellectual property, you need to have management, and engineers need to be closely involved with the capture of this. This intellectual property starts out in the minds of engineers and designers, often called tacit knowledge. It will die with the engineer or disappear with their departure. So engineers need to be trained to articulate the particular value propositions and move it from tacit knowledge into forms of what we call intellectual capital, where they can be repeated, replicated through documentation, through blueprints, through adequate forms of recording of experimentation and the like. However, once that's done, you are vulnerable to being subject to imitation through competitors. All of the skills that Kata has developed in the energy industry, if it doesn't capture it as intellectual property, it will package it ready for the rest of the world to use without being able to itself get market power. So there needs to be keen attention in not only moving knowledge from human capital to intellectual capital that can be replicated, but to intellectual property that will allow Kata to control the use of this knowledge and make it what they call inimitable, not capable of being imitated, because you can use the legal process to prevent unauthorized use of your intellectual property. So it's very important for lawyers and business people to work closely together with engineers and to realize that in the evolution of a product, there needs to be layers of legal protection that involve contract and property forms. Contracts initially to bind employees under confidentiality, non-disclosure agreements, and what we call anti-competitive provisions should they exit employment, and then to have in place procedures to protect the secrets under what we call trade secret law. This involves careful design and protection of all the information systems and capture of that information. The next stage in the evolution of this is to begin to record it in a form that can be protected through copyright or forms of protected designs. And when the product reaches the market, you need to prepare for protection of the dimensions of its naming, its product name, the logo, and any slogan. This needs to be prepared and carefully monitored by lawyers, by business management, working together with engineers. And it's extremely important if kata is to extract the value that it is producing and prevent it from escaping from its hands. Once you successfully capture intellectual property, you can begin to articulate it. And that's where you need skillful business strategists to work together with lawyers. Intellectual property is, as is expressed, a property form, but it needs to be placed into strategies. It may be initially you have a patent, for example, associated with the technology of extracting natural gas, but you plan to take that value and move it to some expressive dimension of the product, its packaging, or even the appearance of equipment that's associated with it. And as you move that to market, you need to move the value to the branding and prepare this. Very important to get the full range of protection and to understand that you might be losing your patent protection or trade secrets in the future, so you need to be moving the value up to the aspects that you can control, expression and trademark, after your patents or trade secrets have died. If you don't do that, you can shorten the life of the value proposition of your product to a very high degree. Successful corporations are very skilled at the sequential planning of the life cycle of intellectual property, moving from the function dimension to the expressive dimension to the branding dimension. And kata needs to be very skilled in watching this very carefully. In doing this, it also needs to think not only about what I call transfer across the dimensions of the product, but evolving intellectual property. If you have protection over aspects of your source product, either function, expression, or branding, you can build on that. And you can create three types. You can develop it into next generation products. You can derive from that and create what we call derivative products. Or in the third case, you can extend and have related products. Skillful use of this allows you to move the value from one of your, the source of your original source of invention to later inventions and build and accelerate the value. From there, you can go into what I call meta products, which is to develop platforms that will control the ability of competitors to produce competitive products, to create suites of interlocking products, and to also create networks so that once one person starts to use it, other people have to use it in order to communicate. These need to be skillfully used. And kata has many value propositions that could be escalated in this particular process. Oops. Finally, it needs to think about what I call migration. It needs to be migrating these products from one industry to another. So not only do you capture the initial intellectual property and think not just about function as engineers tend to, you transfer the value to expression through design to trademark. You evolve, you take that value and you create other products, a derivative that extend the next generation, build suites, platforms, networks. But you also think about intercepting other industries, and Qatar needs to think about this. It has produced great success in energy. How does it migrate to other products and other areas, be it the logistics of shipping, be it the port dynamics? And there will be intellectual property with all of those. And how does it take its success in relation to media and the upcoming FIFA event? How does it turn an event where the value may escape once the last whistle is blown into prolonged legacy value? It can do so, but it needs to think. It needs to be thinking about how it can transfer a very important sporting event to endow Al Jazeera or its sports channel BN with value. And it needs to be able to think about how it integrates that value with the other sports products. And then think about how it can take the intellectual capital and leverage it into other industries. Far from just producing hospitals in Qatar, it can produce franchises for taking healthcare to the Gulf region, to the Islamic region and beyond, and become a principal healthcare provider. But it has to be able to control the intellectual property to do that. And it could move from that point to insurance. It has the financial capability of doing it, and if it could be a principal insurer of health through the Gulf and beyond, it will position itself to capture valuable information about healthcare, and it will begin to control the administration of healthcare in that region, and it will be in a position to create a whole healthcare platform. I could go on at great length about the opportunities I see in Qatar, but they will escape Qatar if it does not plan right now on how it is going to protect its intellectual property, transfer it as it develops product, evolve it into other products, and migrate to other industries. And it needs to be done very skillfully, very much in advance. And now's the time for Qatar to plan to do this. And intellectual property is a robust form of protection that is embraced by the major developed countries and is something that Qatar can harness itself with very little controversy, but with great success. So at that point, I will end my presentation, and I'm more than happy to discuss with you applications of intellectual property and how there are people who are graduating from our college who will have the skill to build the models that are both law and business and that will interface with you as engineers to create the legacy for Qatar. Thank you, shukran.